Sergio Perez has got to go.
Towards Vale now. Who's going to be last on the brakes? Leclerc has that inside line. Through goes Hamilton. Unbelievable stuff.
Let me preface this video by saying I don't actually dislike Sergio Perez. I actually think he's a decent driver, especially given that he spent years at the pinnacle of motorsport, Formula One. However, I do think it's time he left Red Bull. Now, I'm getting ahead of myself, but stop me when I say something unexpected. Another year at Red Bull, and Sergio Perez is underperforming in the car. His teammate, Max Verstappen, is currently leading the championship, outdriving the limitations of the car. That is to say, if Max Verstappen, a generational driver, is leading the championship, you should at least expect Checo to be P6, given the thin margins of performance between each team. However, 12 races in, Checo has slipped from P2 in the standings after a decent start to the season in round 6 down to nearly 8th place if the Mercedes drivers Lewis Hamilton and George Russell continue in their upward trajectory. That's following 3 atrocious performances from Checo, where he was outscored by Nico Hülkenberg 11-16 in a Haas and outqualified by Logan Sargent in a Williams in 2 of the last 4 Grand Prix. That is simply unacceptable in a Red Bull. So the question should be asked, why is Sergio Perez still at a top team, much less in Formula One? Well, up to this point, Checo has been everything Red Bull has needed him to be. He helped Max win the World Championship in 2021. He came in a close third in the 2022 driver standings when Ferrari arguably had the best car to start the season. And in 2023, after a shaky ending, he finished P2 in the driver standings for Red Bull's first ever 1-2 finish. So it should be stated that until now, Checo has been there to pick up the pieces on the rare occasion that Max Verstappen had a mechanical failure or a bad weekend. That's not to say that someone couldn't have done a better job, but that's not the point. The point is, Checo was never meant to be a potential challenge to Max, but a clear number 2 driver. However, if you can't do that, why did Christian Horner lock him into a new 2-year contract before the summer break, knowing that this midseason slump was a possible or even probable outcome, and where do things go from here? Well, for a team known for being brutal with midseason driver swaps, it was honestly surprising to me that Christian Horner signed off on Sergio's new deal so early in the season. That is, until I realized that the deal was less about Checo and more about Christian Horner himself. If you recall, following Christian Horner's allegations regarding a coworker early in the season, it was clear that he was only kept in his current position because of the tie ownership of Red Bull, as it was apparent that Mark Mazepin, the CEO of Red Bull, wanted him out. This all becomes relevant when considering the impact this had on Red Bull Racing itself, as the team deteriorated into 2 factions. One being Christian's camp, and the other being the Verstappen camp, consisting of Max, Helmut Marko, and Max's father Jos. With Jos threatening Horner, with Max leaving for Mercedes, and Helmut saying he wouldn't try to stop Max if he wanted to leave, Horner found himself on the back foot and in need of stability. And what better way to achieve that than with a driver who owes their career to you like Checo? Christian knows Checo will be loyal to him, and it'll suffice Max, as Checo has been the only teammate Max has gotten along with in his career. So, for those of you wondering why Carlos Sainz or someone like Fernando didn't go to Red Bull, that's why. Alright, well, some of you may say, okay, a 1-year deal makes sense, but why 2? I was wondering the same thing myself until this weekend when Checo beaches Red Bull in Q1 of qualifying for the British Grand Prix during an outlap. It was leaked afterwards that Daniel may step into the Red Bull seat for 2025 if Checo doesn't meet certain requirements outlined in his contract by the summer break. Most notably, rumored performance clauses that are in both Daniel and Checo's contracts, with Checo's reportedly saying that he must be within 100 points of his teammate at the summer break, and another being that he must not trail his teammate by more than 5 places in the standings. So as I said earlier, that's P6 at the moment. And with 2 races to go until that deadline, where's Checo's progress right now, you might ask? Well, he trails his teammate by 137 points, and is barely within that 5-place requirement, as I said earlier, as George and Lewis trail him by a combined total of 9 points between the both of them. As for where this is all headed, I don't see Checo meeting this rumored requirement, as it basically means that Max will have to DNF in both races, and Checo will suddenly have to get at least 2 back-to-back P2s, which, to me, is just wildly unrealistic at this point. B, I think a decision will be made following the Belgian Grand Prix, as Helmut Marko was quoted as saying, "We'll know more by the summer break," when asked about Sergio being with the team in 2025, alluding back to those performance requirements. Finally, I think regardless of whether or not Checo hits his mark or not, either he or Daniel will not be at Red Bull next year, or Red Bull team for that matter, as VCarb and Red Bull both seem to be pretty adamant about reviving their junior driving program, starting with Liam Lawson. But looking at it now, I would expect Daniel, another driver who owes their career to Christian, to drive for Red Bull next year, as Lawson isn't a viable option yet, and Yuki has been ignored, unfortunately, despite outperforming Daniel this year.